Welcome in. This is the Week 6 preview for Talking Tide. What has happened to the game that I love? I go away sick for a week. I wake up. I see quarterbacks dropping out due to NIL disputes. I see guys opting out and entering the transfer portal in Week 6. And then I also see the SEC and the Big Ten opting for 8 automatic playoff spots for the two conferences. It's pandemonium at this point. I don't really know what to say about it. I will have plenty to say about it, I'm sure, when I'm not sick and I can jump up on the soapbox and rant for a few hours to you guys. Anyway, this is Talking Tide. We're live with the Week 6 preview. All that stuff will be saved for another day. We've got a full slate of games this week. As mentioned before, I am a little bit sick. I know coming off of that Georgia Bama game, I thought it was just, like sore throat from that game or whatever, but been a little bit sick this week, been a little bit under the weather, so we're going to try and burn this one out on a Friday night. With it being Bama Vandy, I thought it was going to be a pretty short show, but unfortunately for me, hopefully not for you guys, it's a pretty stacked slate of games this week. I don't really have any blowouts this week necessarily, other than maybe Bama Vandy. But stacked show, let's just go ahead and we'll get straight into it. I've tried to be a little more prepared for this one. I've got the actual sheet of paper here. I'm not going to let you see my handwriting too much. This show is going to be powered by NyQuil and the Mexican food I had for lunch today. It's also powered by SeatGeek and by On It Athlete. If you guys need some tickets for these games this weekend, or if you want some trading cards, I love trading cards personally. I know it's kind of a nerdy thing, but I do love trading cards. Go get you some on it and go get you some tickets at SeatGeek for this weekend. Like I said, we got a full slate of games. Game number 1, I want to break it down. We've got Auburn at Georgia. Georgia's a 22-point favorite in this game. It's at Athens. The real question for this game is, does Georgia have the bounce-back power it has had in the past? Now, this is the South's oldest rivalry, I think is what it's called, but it hadn't had a lot of weight these past couple of years. We all remember the prayer and Jordan Hare for Auburn. Yes, I'm going to take a sip of my suspiciously large drink. This rivalry hasn't had the juice it has had in the past, and I don't expect it to really pick up here. The real question is, does Georgia have the bounce-back power it has had in the past? Obviously, lost a tight one to Bama last week. May not have been as tight as it could have been, or rather, it was nearly a blowout, and they actually brought it back and made it a tight game, but I think that was as much to do with Bama as it was to do with Georgia. One thing I want to look at with some of these games is, how does Auburn upset Georgia? Number 1, you got to control time of possession. Like I said, Georgia does not have the offensive explosiveness they've had in the past with guys like Bowers and McConkey. I think you have to hold on to the ball as long as you can if you're Auburn. Keep that Georgia offense off the field because they're not going to hit you super quick. So if you can hold on to the football and that limits their time for the offense to stay on the field, I think it's going to make it a lot harder for Georgia to put up a lot of points. Number 2, you got to run the ball. You got to use Jarquez Hunter. You got to find out some schemes, get him out into space. Georgia has a tough offensive line, probably the hardest that Auburn's going to face all season. I think that, or did I say offensive? I meant defensive line. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a haze, but we'll move on anyway. I don't think that Georgia is going to give them anything easy. That's for dang sure. I think Jarquez Hunter and that offensive line for Auburn are going to have to go out and execute well to try and get a hold in this football game. And number 3, and the biggest of them all, you have to take care of the football. Peyton Thorne has had a serious issue, and not just Peyton Thorne, pretty much all of Auburn. They've had a serious problem with holding on to the football. Thorne has thrown for 6 interceptions this year. I don't think that if you turn the ball over one time against Georgia, you've lost this football game. You have to win the turnover battle. You got to find ways to get the ball back into your offense's hands. We saw Beck last week throw a couple of bad interceptions. He fumbled the ball once as well. So Georgia does have some turnovers in them. It was Alabama. It's going to be a lot tougher job if you're Auburn. You don't have the personnel that Bama does have. But you got to find ways to win the turnover battle. You got to find ways to hold on to the football. And you got to find ways to run it. That's going to be as simple as it gets for Auburn. Kind of the classic ways to win a football game when you're the underdog. The thing is, if you're Georgia, what do you look for in this football game? The thing is, there's no more room for error for Georgia in SEC play. You lost one SEC game, and now it gets into a little bit tighter spots. You play Texas. That's going to be a tough one. But you can't look over these games like Auburn. I think that one funny thing I actually kind of just noticed was Vandy's actually a closer game. Vandy-Bama is actually a closer game than Auburn-Georgia. I don't know how that works out. Georgia's a 22-point dog, I want to say, and Bama's like a 21.5 or something like that. Weird times in college football. But I think that if Georgia can out-execute Auburn, which they can, they have the personnel to do it, I think they'll be fine. If you're Auburn, what you have to do to win this football game is you got to drag it into deep water. You got to make it a fourth quarter game. You got to put Georgia on their heels a little bit, kind of like Kentucky did. The thing is, you just got to, at the end of the day, hold on to the football. If you give them 2 turnovers, you've lost this game already. If you can find one takeaway, find one special teams play, find something to keep your guys in the ball game, you can win it. The problem is, I don't think Hugh Freeze is nearly as good of a coach as Kirby Smart is. I think Georgia's going to come into this game very motivated. Again, I don't think they have the explosive power that they've had in the past, but I think they're going to be much more motivated than Auburn. They're going to have the home crowd on their side. They just lost to Bama. They're looking for a bounce back. They know there's no more room for error anymore in SEC play. So I've got Georgia to win this game. I actually have Auburn to cover the plus 22. I feel like Georgia will win this one by around 17. Just because I think that they're both looking to get in there and get out. They both are probably going to try and dominate the ground. They're both going to probably try and just eat up time of possession. And I think Georgia go out there and win it, 35. They put up 35 points, win it by 17, somewhere around there. All right, next game. Also, I had this whole nice graphic set up for that, but, I didn't press it because brain fog and NyQuil. Next game, I got UCF, Florida. This one's actually a primetime game on SEC Network. 6:45 kickoff, I think, is what it is. I'm excited for this football game. Bama, Vandy will be over by the time this game kicks off, and it's going to be Arkansas, Tennessee as the only other game that's going to be on. I'm excited to watch this football game. I think that it'll be something a little more entertaining. It's out of conference, so it doesn't matter as much. The real question for this game is who leads the quarterback play for Florida this week. They've put out saying that there's still going to be a dual quarterback system. I think Lagway is the future for Florida at the quarterback spot. Has a lot of talent, has shown it in spurts. I don't think this team is what is going to get the best out of him, but I think if he can show in some good spots that he can play football, I think he'll be the future for this program. Mertz played a good game last week. Not last week, a couple weeks ago. Last week against Mississippi State. They lost a tough one at A&M. They never really looked like they were going to win that game. My problem is going forward for Florida, the way they lose this football game is they don't find a rhythm. And I think when you play a dual quarterback system like you did when you played against Texas A&M, there is no rhythm in that football game. Neither quarterback can get up with the speed of play, being traded in and out every single time. I think when you play an effective dual quarterback system, it's situational football. I think if you put Lagway out there or Mertz out there, see how they're working, how they're affecting the football game, and then just say, can the other guy do it better? And then you put the other guy in. If he doesn't do it any better, okay, well, then you have a decision to make. If he starts to play it better, then at least you're working in the right direction. I don't think trading a guy out every single drive is the move. I said that before for Florida. I'll see what they do this week. I don't know if that's the game plan they're going to go with. Mertz played probably the best game of the year for Florida last year against Mississippi State. Went out, got an away win. So I think that Lagway is the future, but I think that Mertz might have to be the guy to win you this football game. All right, let's look on the other side of the ball. Let's look at UCF. They got a familiar name, KJ Jefferson. Played SEC ball for most of his career. Transferred to UCF last year. He's put up over 1,000 all-purpose yards. Granted, it's been against high school teams, effectively, with all respect to the people they've played. The problem when you look at for UCF is you look at the last 2 games they've played. They played TCU. They played Colorado. They squeaked by with a 1-point win against TCU. They got blown out, embarrassed, and exposed against Colorado. That's a real problem for them. They're on a bit of a downswing with these past 2 weeks. I don't know if it's due to the upgrade in talent they've played. What do you think about Colorado? What do you think about TCU? Doesn't really matter. They've played an uptick in talent on the other side of the ball, and they really struggled with it. They got a 1-point win, and they got blown out by 3 touchdowns in the other game. So I think that one thing you have to do for Florida, you got to keep the crowd involved in this game. It's at the Swamp. It's 6:45. It's a night game. One of the toughest environments in college football historically. You got to keep the crowd in it. You can't go out there and get points put up on you early. I think you've got to find a rhythm with one of your 2 quarterbacks. I don't know who it's going to be. You got to find a situational win. You had a bye week last week. You had time to game plan for this. You saw the other team go out and get beat by Colorado. You got to figure out how to do it with one of your 2 quarterbacks. Find the guy who's got the rhythm and stick with him for the game. I think that's how Florida win this football game. I've got Florida to win this. I've got Florida to cover. It's like a 1.5 point spread either way, so it's a flip 'em game. I've got Florida to win this game. I think that Marks found something a little bit last week. Granted, it was Mississippi State. I think UCF are a little bit of a better team than Mississippi State, depending on who you ask. But, sorry. I think that Florida go out. I think that Florida win this game at home. All right. Move on to the next game. We got Tennessee, Arkansas. So, again, this is going to be another one of those games where if you look at it from the outside looking in, it looks like a blowout game for Tennessee. I think there's a way that Arkansas will win this ball game. And, again, it's kind of the same thing we talked about Auburn. You got to take care of the football. Green has thrown the Arkansas quarterback 5 touchdowns, 5 picks. 3 of those picks have been in the last 2 weeks. So it's not been a great trend for him. Last week also against Texas A&M, they did not run the ball effectively. I want to say, I can actually let me look. I want to see how many yards they put up on the ground last week because it was not a lot. Yeah, not great numbers in the rushing game. That was the one thing I didn't actually write down. Jaquindon Jackson had 509 rushing yards this year, 9 touchdowns, averages about 6.4 per carry. Last week, stuck to 10 carries, 37 yards, and a touchdown. Not great. Green also picked up like 13 rushing yards. The key for Arkansas to win this ball game, you got to win the run game. Tennessee's got a good defensive front, probably the best one they've had for a long time. They get after quarterbacks very effectively. It's a big uphill climb for Arkansas. The key for Arkansas in this game, you got to stay in it early. Tennessee are historically hot when starting, not just this year but last year as well. They did cool off a little bit in that Oklahoma game. They went out and put up like 15 points early or something like that, and then just kicked a bunch of field goals in the second half. So they weren't able to finish drives as effectively against Oklahoma. Obviously, with the Brent Venables team, it's going to be defensively focused. And even though they don't have on offense, Oklahoma is an okay football team. One that Tennessee probably should have beat worse than they did, but again, they weren't able to finish off drives. A couple of things for Tennessee. If you're able to put effective pressure on the quarterback, you should win this football game no problem. I think if they go very one-dimensional, you start forcing quarterback mistakes, you force them just to run the ball where they can't really stretch it out at all, I think you win this game no problem. I think that Tennessee has a little bit of an untested secondary still. They haven't really faced a quarterback that can go out there and stretch the ball around the field. I don't think they're going to face that this week either. But if Arkansas can go out and they can find a few soft spots in that defensive secondary, they could have a shot in it. Again, you just can't go out and get blown out early. One of the scary things for Arkansas is Tennessee has had a bye week this week. If you give Josh Heupel and that football team time to prepare for you, you're going to have a lot of problems. Heupel can drop as good of an offensive scheme as anybody in the country. So I think that Arkansas got to establish a run game, got to figure out how to get a takeaway or two, win some time of possession, and just keep that explosive offense off the field for as long as you possibly can. And when you're on the field as offense, you got to try and find soft spots in the secondary and establish some type of a run game. If you go one-dimensional either way, you're never going to win this football game. I'm taking Tennessee in this game. I'm taking Tennessee to cover. I don't think Arkansas have enough to get this game done, but you never know. We could see them on a little bit of an upswing, but I doubt it. Next game, we got Missouri at A&M. So let's go ahead and get to that. So, now the real talk about in this game is Texas A&M 25 team in the AP poll. I don't put a lot in the AP polls anyway. Missouri number 9. Texas A&M is actually the favorite coming into this game, and you got to ask yourself, how does a 25th ranked team become the favorite over a number 9 ranked team? The answer is simple. You go out and you play 2 games like Missouri has had in the past 2 weeks. 1 in double overtime against Vanderbilt, 1 against Boston College by 6 points. That's not exactly the stature of a number 9 ranked team, but I think that, for me, it's going to be who can win the trenches in this football game and wins this game. I think Missouri, I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. I think Missouri win this football game outright. I will say Texas A&M probably has the better skill guys. As far as like raw talent, I think they have some of the best skill guys in the country. I don't think they have a great quarterback, personally, whether it's Wigman or Marcel Reed. I think that Brady Cook is good enough in these situations. Yeah, you're going into A&M, you're going into hostile territory. Brady Cook's enough of a veteran to go out and kind of guide your team through this football game. I don't think he's going to have a generational game. I don't think he's the generational talent that people thought he might have been last year. But I think Missouri can go out there. If they can control the trenches, they win this football game, despite having the maybe lack in the skill positions everywhere else on the field. For A&M, it's going to come down to, I think Marcel Reed will start this game. I know that Wigman's had some injury problems. I think even if he's healthy, I think Marcel Reed goes out and starts this game. He led them to a win against Arkansas last week, grinded out a tough win. For me, it's just going to come down to, if Texas A&M can go out and get a hot start, I think they have a chance in it. I just don't think at the end of the day they have, I won't even say it's necessarily the leadership, but you got to go out and you got to grind against a Missouri team that's tough defensively. Granted, they haven't always played the best competition, and when they have, they've struggled at times, but I think this Missouri team is a better team than what they've shown the past 2 weeks. Are they a top 10 team? To me, probably not, but I think they have enough to go out there and get a win against A&M. The hard thing for A&M is going to be, it's going to be a little bit of trial by fire. It's their first away game of the year. Every other game they've played has been, non-ranked, fairly easy opponents. I don't think Boston College was ranked when they played them. But the biggest test for Missouri is going to be, can you go out there and deal with a hostile crowd at Texas A&M? You got to come out with a game plan. You had a bye week last week. And you have to drop a game plan that can go out there and win you this game fairly comfortably. The real big, I think, exclamation point of this game is going to be Missouri have to play good enough. Texas A&M have to play a good football game. Marcel Reed's going to have to go out. I assume he'll start. He'll have to go out, deliver a good football game. Brady Cook will have to go out there and be effective. He needs to go out there, no interceptions, no turnovers, put up a score or two, and try and help your team lead. Just lean on the offensive line, lean on the defensive line, try and get pressure on Reed, force him into mistakes. Still a young enough kid where you can definitely affect his head a little bit. I don't think Brady would get as affected as Marcel Reed will in this game. I've got Missouri to win. I've got Missouri to cover in this game. But if you're Texas A&M, you look at this year and you say, okay, yeah, we lost to Notre Dame early. We beat Florida. We beat Arkansas. Can we go a sneaky 3-0 in conference play? I will say, if Texas A&M go out and win this football game, full credit to them. I'm not putting money on... Actually, I did put money on Missouri, so I've got them as the outright winner, so I may be a little bit biased. I think if Texas A&M go out and get a win in this game, it'll flip the script to a point of where, yeah, we lost to Notre Dame early in the season, non-conference game, first game of the year, all that kind of stuff. And then you hit 3-0 in conference play, and you're like, okay, we're sneaky putting together a pretty good season here. For Missouri, if you go out and you lose this game, your season's over. It's kind of like Ole Miss, we're going to talk about later. If you lose this game, the season's over for you. And when you had a lot of expectations coming into the season, A&M always has expectations on them. Got a new head coach, have a lot of talent on that roster. It's kind of been the same story with them. If they can win this game, maybe they flip the script a little bit. But for Missouri, they've got to come out. They got to play a good football game, win in the trenches, do the simple things right, and just out-execute A&M on the front lines. And I think they win this ball game. All right. Speaking of Ole Miss, we got them up next. They play. Oh, that's the wrong game. Well, you don't even need to see the stats. That'll be all right. That's what I get for producing the show as one man. All right. Ole Miss, South Carolina. I'm going to put it simply. Ole Miss have to win this football game. If they do not win it, their season is over. They do not have the strength of schedule to say, we lost 2 games, but they were against good football teams. Granted, they may be against good enough football teams. They do not have the strength of schedule to stack up with anybody else in the SEC that might make it to the playoffs. They're not going to stack up with Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, or Alabama in strength of schedule. When you look at this game, you got to look at how are they going to win this football game. I think the real key is to look back and see how they lost last week's ball game. They got time of possession. They lost that game 40 minutes to 20 minutes. So Kentucky held the ball for 40 minutes. They only held it for 20, which they have a quick strike offense. Maybe not the biggest red flag. You lost the turnover battle, and then you missed a field goal to tie the game as time expired. That's how you lose football games in the SEC. It's not that hard. You go out, you get 1 turnover. The other team plays decent enough defense, and you can lose a football game very, very quickly in the SEC. And that's what happened last week. Will the same thing happen this week? I don't know. Ole Miss is right about a 10-point favorite. I think for Ole Miss, you got to go out, you got to silence the crowd early. This is the first real away test you play. You played Wake in week 3, not a big away test. You go into probably one of the most hotly contested spots in the SEC. South Carolina could be 4-0 this year. They lost a close one to LSU, which I'll be honest, I think they got a little bit screwed out of in that game due to some officiating. They beat Kentucky. They dominated Kentucky. They struggled against Old Dominion. I still think that's an outlier at this point. You went out, you blitzed Kentucky. You should have beat LSU, if not due to a little bit of an officiating issue in that game. And then they beat Akron 50-0 or whatever it was last week. So I think that South Carolina is a better team than their record says they are. I think that Ole Miss, I'm not going to say they're a worse team than their record says they are, but when you look at the games that they've won, none of them have been against real impressive opponents. And the first opponent you put up that's an SEC not contender, but an SEC player, you lose that game 20-17. Very stop-starty on the offense. It wasn't great. Again, you lost the turnover battle and you lost the special teams play. So if you can avoid doing that, I think they'll be okay in this game. But like I said, they got to get the crowd out of this game early. If they don't, if South Carolina drags us into a full quarter game where that crowd's in it 24/7, I don't see Ole Miss winning. They didn't win a dogfight last week. I don't think they're going to win a dogfight this week. I think that they've got to go out and establish themselves. They got to start hot, and if they don't, I think they're going to be in real trouble. Question for South Carolina, will Lenora Sellers be healthy? I think he will be. I think that they will probably need him in this game. It's a tough game. He gives you a little bit more of a dual threat than what Robbie Ashford does. Robbie Ashford did put up some really good numbers last week against Akron. It was Akron. I think that they were trying to keep Sellers healthy for this game. Rocket Sanders needs to go out and put up good numbers as well. It's a game where Ole Miss is favored, but I'm really leaning heavy South Carolina in this ball game. The more and more I talk about it, if you can get Rocket Sanders to be effective in this game, I think he'll be good. He put up like 2 touchdowns and a couple 100 yards against LSU. I think if you can go out and put up numbers like that, and Sellers goes out there and plays you a decent enough ball game, or Ashford, whoever ends up playing, I think Sellers is going to be starting this game, and if he can't go, I think you put Robbie Ashford in. I don't think you're going to lose a ton of production there. Robbie Ashford, experienced enough in tough situations, and again, he put up good numbers last week. So I'll be curious to see who goes there on the quarterback front. I think Sellers is probably your number one go-to guy, but if not, I think Robbie Ashford can get the job done. I said I'm leaning South Carolina in this game with all that I've been said. I'm going to pick Ole Miss to win this ball game. I think they figure out a way to win it. I think I'm not going to say South Carolina covers because I feel like if it's a dogfight, Ole Miss lose. So I'm going to take Ole Miss to win. I'm going to take Ole Miss to cover because they have to. And if they don't, I'm not going to say Lane Kiffin's on the hot seat or anything, but It's a tough spot to be in when you have a team that is kind of your generational talent team, and you go out and you give it 2-0 in SEC play in the first two real weeks of conference play. So we'll see what happens in that game. I think that's going to be another fun one. 12:30 kickoff. I think it's going to be a very entertaining football game. So I think that'll be a fun one. All right, Bama Vandy, last game we're going to talk about today. For Bama, it's simple. You got to stop Diego Pavia, whether it's with his arm or with his legs. I think he's more dangerous running the ball. I'll be completely honest. Good guy when he can get into space. Tricky, shifty between the tackles. So if you're Bama and you can stuff that run game from Pavia, you win this game no problem. If you force him to use his arm, force him to drop back in the pocket, get some pressure on him, make him make some mistakes, it's a no problem kind of game. I think a couple things for Bama. I think it's going to be a limited playbook. I don't think we're going to see the 11 receivers catching the football. I don't think we're going to see as much pre-snap motion. I think we're going to limit it to let Jalen make simple reads. We'll get the run game going. Make it simple, no mistakes. Win both fronts of the ball. Win the defensive line. Win the offensive line. And we get out of this game healthy. Those are the real keys I want to see in this game. Offensive line did a great job last week against Georgia. Defensive line did a good enough job stuffing the run. I do want to see more pressure being put on quarterbacks. I think this week it'll be a little bit easier against a team like Vanderbilt than it was against a team like Georgia. I want to see some quarterback pressures, but I also want to see some contain. We've struggled in the past with mobile quarterbacks, almost over-rushing them, getting past them, and then they can step out and make things happen with their legs. Jay Daniels, LSU last year, is a perfect example of that. So I want to see some contain. I want to see a little bit more quarterback pressure. I want to stuff the run. And the biggest thing I want to see how effectively we can put together a run game without Jalen Milroe. I want to see Jam. I want to see Justice. I want to see them bust a couple of runs, but also control the ball a little bit. Those 6-7 yard runs that we didn't really see at all last week with Jam and Justice. I think we can do it. This offensive line is much improved. They did a great job last week with quarterback protection. We just got to open up a few more run gaps, I think, and we will be just fine. Like I said, if we put some pressure on the quarterback, we force Pavia to throw the ball, make some mistakes early, we can be out of this game, 28-0 first half and drop the secondaries in. I think we'll be fine. I got Bama to win. I got Bama to cover. Kendrick Law is a questionable guy in this game. I think just because it's Vandy, we can sit him. He'll be fine next week. Yeah, I think that's it. If we walk out of this game healthy, walk out of it looking effective enough as a football team, we don't have to put up 67 points or whatever in this game. I want us to go out and win. I want us to cover. I want us to put pressure on the quarterback, and I want to win the run game. And then if we do all that, I'll be happy as a clam. So I think that's all the games we have this week. Sorry, it was kind of a rush through preview. I don't even know how many minutes we got in. Yeah, 28 minutes. I'm going to go take my medicine. I'm going to go get some NyQuil. I'm going to drink a hot drink and hope I feel a little bit better. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I think that's about it for the week. Yeah, nothing I really forgot. So appreciate you guys tuning in. If you got anything on this week, drop them down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Where you see upsets happening. Who you think I got wrong this week? I'll drop my betting lines this week. I didn't bet it all last week because I was too nervous about the Bama Georgia game. So we threw some money down this week. So I'll post that on Instagram. Don't forget to follow Talking Tide on Instagram as well. I appreciate you guys stopping by, and I will see y'all next week. Roll Tide.